I spent years giving him everything, my time, my love, my life. I raised him alone, believing my sacrifices would be enough. But then she came and suddenly I was invisible in my own home. Every smile she got, every word he said to her, it cut me deeper than I ever imagined. How could the person I nurtured push me aside without a second thought? I thought love was enough. But I was wrong. When my daughter-in-law told me to step out of the kitchen, I smiled instead of crying. I wiped my hands on my dupatta, I stepped back quietly. And I told myself it was nothing. But inside me something went silent. I had raised my son alone. And now, inside my own home, I felt like I no longer belonged. I am Saad's mother. And this is my story. I remember the day Saad was born like it was yesterday. The rain was soft that night. The hospital lights were dim. And I held him close to my chest, whispering promises he could not hear. I told him I would always be there. I told him I would protect him from every storm. I told him I would never let him feel alone. His father passed away when Saad was only 4 years old. One moment, I was a wife. The next moment, I was a widow with a small child and a heavy heart. People told me I was strong. But I did not feel strong, that I only felt responsible. I worked, that I cooked, that I cleaned, I prayed, that I cried quietly at night when Saad was asleep. Every decision I made was for him. Every sacrifice was for him. Every dream I gave up was so he could have his own. I never complained, that I never reminded him that I only loved him. Years passed. Saad grew into a gentle, polite boy. He respected elders, he spoke softly, he held my hand when we crossed roads. When he laughed, my worries became lighter. When he studied late at night, I made tea for him. When he failed once, I told him failure was only a lesson. I was not perfect. But I was present. Then one day, Saad told me about Sanaa. He came home from work with a shy smile. He sat beside me and said, "Mom, there is someone I want you to meet." I could hear happiness in his voice. And my heart felt both warm and afraid. I met Sanaa a week later. She was polite, soft-spoken. She smiled with her eyes. She touched my feet with respect. I thanked Allah quietly. I told myself maybe she will be like a daughter. The wedding was simple, no loud demands, no drama. Just quiet happiness. On the wedding night, when Saad left my room after hugging me, I stood near the door for a long time. I told myself this was the natural order of life, that a son grows up, that a son marries, that a mother steps back. I thought I was ready. I was wrong. The first few months were calm. Sanaa cooked sometimes, I cooked sometimes, we shared the kitchen without speaking much. I noticed small changes, but I ignored them. Sanaa rearranged the cupboards. She moved my spice jars. She changed where the plates were kept. I told myself it was normal. She was settling in. One afternoon, I reached for the salt jar and could not find it. I asked gently, "Sanaa, son, where did you keep the salt?" She smiled and said, "Oh Mom, I changed things. It's easier this way." I smiled back, that I said nothing. That day something shifted. Slowly the house stopped feeling like mine. The walls were the same. The furniture was the same. But the silence felt different. Saad started eating dinner later. He sat with Sanaa in their room. Our conversations became short. I told myself he was busy. Work. Marriage. Life. One evening, I entered the kitchen to make tea. Sanaa was already there. She looked at me and said softly, "Mom, you don't need to cook now. I'll manage." Her voice was calm. But her words felt heavy. I nodded, that I stepped back. I sat alone in my room, holding my cup of water. I listened to the sound of spoons clinking. I listened to their quiet laughter. Felt like a guest. I never raised my voice. I never complained to Saad. I did not want to become that mother. I only swallowed my feelings. Days turned into weeks. Weeks into months. One morning, Sanaa was cleaning the living room. That I picked up a cushion and tried to help. She paused, she smiled again, and she said, "Mom, please rest. You've done enough in your life." Her words were meant to be kind. But they made me feel old. Useless. Finished. I went to my room and closed the door gently. I sat on my prayer mat and cried without sound. I remembered carrying Saad on my hip while cooking. I remembered washing his school uniform at night. I remembered standing in lines for fees, medicines, books. Had I really done enough? One evening during dinner, Saad talked about moving furniture. Sana nodded enthusiastically. I listened quietly. No one asked me what I thought. I smiled and kept eating. That night, I stared at the ceiling for a long time. The fan hummed softly. The house felt colder than usual. I realized something painful that night. I was still living in the same house. But I was no longer part of the decisions. The woman who raised the house was slowly becoming invisible inside it. I loved Sanadat, or at least I wanted to. But I could not understand how love could make me feel so small. I prayed for patience, that I prayed for wisdom, I prayed for my heart to stay soft. Because the truth was simple. I raised my son alone. But now I did not know where I stood in his life. And this was only the beginning. I did not tell anyone how lonely I was becoming. Loneliness does not always come from being alone. Sometimes it comes from being surrounded by people who no longer see you. Every morning I woke up before everyone else. Out of habit. Out of routine. Out of a lifetime of responsibility that does not disappear overnight. I would sit on the edge of my bed and listen to the house breathe. The quiet hum of the refrigerator. The distant sound of a passing car. The soft ticking of the wall clock. This house had heard my laughter, it had heard my prayers, it had heard my cries in the dark. Now, it only heard my silence. I used to make breakfast for Saad before he woke up. Even when he was a grown man, I liked doing it. It made me feel useful, it made me feel close to him. But after Sana came, breakfast became different. Some days Sana would already be in the kitchen, some days she would say, "Mom, please sit." "I'll do it." And I would sit. Not because I wanted to. But because I did not know where I fit anymore. One morning, Saad came into the kitchen while Sana was cooking. I stood near the door, waiting to ask if he wanted tea. He smiled at Sana and said, "It smells nice." He smiled back. I stood there for a few seconds longer. Neither of them noticed. So I turned around and walked away quietly. That moment stayed with me longer than it should have. I remembered the days when Saad would run to the kitchen, asking what I was cooking. When he would steal bites and laugh. When the kitchen was our place. Now I felt like a shadow passing through it. I tried to keep myself busy. I folded laundry slowly. I watered the plants. I cleaned spaces that were already clean. I was not tired. I was restless. Sometimes Sana would talk about her plans. How she wanted to decorate the house. How she wanted things to be modern. Clean. Simple. Saad listened attentively. I listened too, but I did not speak. I did not want to sound old. I did not want to sound difficult. I did not want to become a problem. That fear followed me everywhere. One afternoon, Sana had guests over. I stayed in my room, giving her space. When I finally came out, the guests were leaving. One of them looked at me and asked Sana, "Oh, is this your aunt?" Sana smiled politely and said, "No, she's Saad's mother." The guest nodded awkwardly. Smiled too. But inside something cracked. I had lived in this house for decades. I had built it with patience and sacrifice. And now, to strangers, I was just someone passing through. That night I could not sleep. I thought about my younger self. The woman who stood strong after her husband's death. The woman who never leaned on anyone. The woman who raised her son with dignity. Had I really raised him to forget me? No, I knew Saad loved me. But love changes shape. And sometimes it leaves people behind without meaning to. The next day I decided to speak. Not complain. Not accuse, just speak. I waited until Saad was alone in the living room. I sat beside him, keeping my voice soft. "Saad," I said, "are you happy?" He looked surprised, then he smiled. "Yes, Mom. Of course." I nodded. "That's good." I wanted to say more, that I wanted to tell him I felt invisible, I wanted to tell him I missed him. But the words stayed stuck in my chest. I did not want to sound needy, I did not want to sound weak. So I stayed quiet. That night, Sana came to my room with folded clothes. She placed them on my bed. "Mom," she said gently, "you should rest more. You've done so much already." Again those words. "You've done enough." I smiled and thanked her. But when she left, I sat on the bed and stared at my hands. These hands had fed a child. These hands had worked endlessly. These hands had held a family together. Were they no longer needed? The hardest part was not Sanaa. She was not cruel, she was not loud, she was simply present. The hardest part was how quietly I was fading. I noticed Saad stopped asking for my advice. Stopped sharing small things. Stopped sitting with me in the evenings. He was not unkind, he was just busy building a new life. And I was standing at the edge of it. One evening it started raining heavily. The sound reminded me of the night Saad was born. I stood near the window, watching the water fall. The sky was dark. The street lights reflected on the wet road. Sanaa came and stood beside me. "It's beautiful," she said. "Yes," I replied. "It reminds me of old days." She nodded but did not ask more. She went back to her room. I stayed at the window. I realized then that memories have weight. And when no one shares them with you, they become heavy to carry alone. Later that night, I heard Saad and Sanaa laughing softly in their room. Their happiness should have comforted me. Instead, it made me feel smaller. I lay down and closed my eyes. I told myself this was life. This was change. This was normal. But my heart whispered something else. It whispered that love should not erase. It whispered that respect should not fade quietly. It whispered that a mother should not feel like furniture in her own home. I did not want control, I did not want attention. I only wanted acknowledgement. I only wanted to feel seen. As days passed, I became quieter, and why smiles became shorter, and why presence became lighter. And no one noticed. That was the most painful part. Not the words spoken, but the silence that followed. Not the changes made, but the absence of asking. I raised him alone, that I gave him everything I had. And now, without anger, without blame, I was learning what it feels like to slowly disappear. This was the beginning of my quiet struggle, a struggle I carried with grace, a struggle no one asked about. And the storm inside me was only starting to form. After that quiet realization settled inside me, I started looking at my life more carefully. Not with anger. Not with blame. But with honesty. I had always believed that if I stayed kind, if I stayed silent, if I stayed patient, everything would find its balance. That belief had guided my whole life. When Saad's father passed away, people came to our house for days. They spoke words of sympathy. They brought food, they cried with me. Then slowly they returned to their lives. I was left behind with a small boy and a house full of echoes. Those early years shaped me. I learned how to wake up strong, even when my heart felt heavy. I learned how to hide my fears behind routine. I learned how to become both mother and father. Saad does not remember much of that time. But I remember everything. I remember counting money late at night. I remember deciding which bills could wait. I remember pretending I was not tired. I also remember laughter. Simple moments. Shared meals on the floor. Stories before bedtime. That was our world. So when Sanaa entered that world, I wanted her to feel safe inside it. I wanted her to feel respected. I wanted her to feel welcomed. I never saw her as someone who came to replace me. I saw her as someone who came to join us. In the beginning, she was careful around me. She would ask before doing things. She would look to me for approval. She would speak softly. And I appreciated that. I never wanted to be controlling, that I never wanted to be strict. I believed love grows best in freedom. Saad seemed happy, he smiled more, he talked about his work with excitement, he made plans for the future. Watching him like that gave me peace. I told myself this is what I worked for. Still, I noticed how the house slowly changed its rhythm. Earlier evenings were our time. Saad would sit with me, that we would talk about small things. News, neighbors, life. Now, evenings belonged to their room. I would hear the door close softly. Not locked. Just closed. That simple sound carried weight. I did not interrupt, I did not knock, that I respected their space. But no one noticed how my space was shrinking. I tried to create a new routine for myself. After Maghrib prayer, I would sit near the window, I would read quietly. Sometimes I would just watch the street. Life outside kept moving. Children played. People argued, vendors shouted. Inside my house, everything felt slower. One afternoon, Sana sat with me in the living room. She talked about her childhood, about her parents, about her dreams. I listened carefully. She said she liked things organized. She liked planning. She liked independence. I nodded. I told her about my younger days. About how life was different back then. How women adjusted more than they spoke. She listened politely. But I could tell she did not fully understand. And that was okay. We come from different times. I never expected her to live like me. I only hoped she would see me. Slowly, Sana took charge of the house. Not forcefully. Not rudely. Just naturally. She decided meal timings. She decided grocery lists. She decided when guests came over. Saad supported her. I stayed quiet. There were moments when I wanted to say something. Like when my favorite chair was moved, or when my old utensils were replaced, or when decisions were made without my knowledge. But every time I stopped myself. I told myself, let her settle. I told myself this is her home too. But I did not ask myself one important question. Where is my place now? One evening, Saad mentioned they were thinking of repainting the house. Sana spoke excitedly about light colors. Modern shades. Minimal designs. Saad agreed. They looked at me briefly, then continued talking. Smiled. Inside, I remembered painting these walls with Saad's father. I remembered choosing colors together. I remembered the smell of fresh paint and hope. Those memories stayed inside me. Unspoken. I realized something painful during that conversation. I was no longer part of the past or the future. I was just present. Invisible but present. That night, I asked myself a difficult question. Did I raise Saad to stand strong? Or to forget where he came from? The answer was not simple. Saad still respected me, he still greeted me kindly, he still asked about my health. But respect without inclusion feels hollow. Feels like kindness from a distance. I did not want him to choose between me and Sana. That was never my wish. I only wanted balance. But balance requires awareness. And awareness was missing. I also tried to understand Sana. She came into a house with history. With routines she did not build. With a woman who had lived there for decades. Maybe she felt pressure too. Maybe she felt the need to prove herself. Maybe she believed stepping forward meant pushing me back. I do not blame her. But understanding someone does not erase pain. One morning while folding laundry together, Sana said something that stayed with me. She said, "Mom, times are different now. Things change." I smiled and replied, "Yes, son. They always do." But in my heart I whispered, not everything should disappear. As days passed, I began to feel tired more often. Not physically. Emotionally. It takes energy to remain silent. It takes strength to smile when you feel unseen. Some nights, I would sit on my prayer mat longer than usual. I did not ask for much. I asked for peace, that I asked for clarity, that I asked for a soft heart. Because bitterness was knocking quietly. And I did not want to let it in. I knew this was only the beginning of a deeper change. The calm before emotions find their voice. The setup before conflict reveals itself. I was still holding on. Still believing things would adjust. Still hoping that one day someone would notice my absence, even while I was standing right there. As time moved forward, I started noticing patterns. Not big moments. Not loud arguments. Just small things that repeat quietly until they become part of everyday life. Saad and Sana developed their own rhythm. They planned weekends together. They discussed finances, they talked about future goals. I would hear bits and pieces when they spoke in the living room. Sometimes they lowered their voices. Sometimes they did not. I never listened intentionally. But silence makes sounds travel far. I was happy that Saad had a partner. Truly. A man should not walk through life alone, that I knew that better than anyone. Still, I felt like I was standing at the edge of a circle that once included me. One evening, Sana asked me about my health. "Mom, do you feel tired these days?" she asked. I nodded gently. "A little," I said. She suggested I see a doctor. She even offered to book an appointment. Her concern was real. And yet, something felt missing. Concern without closeness feels formal. Like duty. Not like family. Saad supported her suggestion. He said, "Mom, listen to Sana. Take care of yourself." I smiled and agreed. Inside, I wondered when my son started needing someone else to remind him to worry about me. I noticed Sana becoming more confident in the house. She invited her friends over. She hosted small gatherings. She laughed freely. I stayed in my room during those times. Not because I was asked to, but because I felt out of place. Once, Sana came to my room and said, "Mom, please join us." I went. I sat quietly. I smiled when spoken to. I answered politely. But the conversations were not meant for me. They talked about things I did not relate to. Shows. Social media plans. I nodded and stayed silent. After a while, I returned to my room. Not offended. Just tired. That night I asked myself again, is this what growing old feels like? Being present but not included. I remembered my own mother. She lived with us when I was younger. I remember how she slowly became quiet too. At that time I thought she was just tired, that I did not understand. Now I did. Life repeats itself in quiet ways. One afternoon I decided to cook Saad's favorite dish. I wanted to surprise him. I spent time preparing it. I cooked slowly, carefully. When dinner was served, Sana looked surprised. "Oh Mom, you didn't have to," she said. Saad smiled and thanked me. They ate. They appreciated it. But after dinner, Sana said, "Next time please tell me before cooking. I plan meals ahead." Her tone was calm. Reasonable. He nodded. I did not tell her that cooking for my son was not just about food. It was about love. It was about holding on. From that day I stopped cooking unless asked. The kitchen officially became hers. I stayed away. The days felt longer. I filled them with prayers, small chores, and memories. Sometimes Saad would sit with me for a few minutes. He would ask, "Are you okay, Mom?" I would say yes. Because how do you explain empty nest to someone who is full? I also noticed how Sana and Saad began making decisions together without informing me. Not asking, just informing. "We are buying new curtains, we are changing the sofa, we are thinking of traveling next month." I listened. I smiled. I felt like a relative being updated, not a mother being included. One evening I gathered courage. I told Saad softly, "You don't sit with me much these days." He looked surprised. Then a little guilty. "I'm sorry, Mom," he said. "Work is tiring. And Sana needs me too." He nodded. He was not wrong. But something about that sentence hurt. As if I was no longer someone who needed him. Only someone he visited. After that conversation he made effort for a few days. He sat with me. He talked. Then life returned to its pace. Effort without understanding does not last. I did not bring it up again. I did not want to sound repetitive. I started keeping my thoughts to myself. I smiled more. I spoke less. People often mistake silence for strength. In reality, silence is often protection. One night, I dreamed of Saad as a child. He was calling me, running toward me. I woke up with tears on my pillow. I sat up and placed my hand on my chest. Change is natural. I knew that. But why did it feel like loss? I began to understand that this was not about Sana. This was about transition. About a mother stepping into a spacino one prepares her for. Society talks about marriage. About adjustment. About new beginnings. No one talks about the quiet grief of mothers, who are asked to disappear gracefully. I was trying to do that. Gracefully. Without noise. Without complaint. But inside me, questions were growing. Who am I now? What is my role? Where do I belong? One afternoon, Sana and I had a long conversation. She talked about wanting privacy, about independence, about building her own home environment. I listened. I understood her words. I told her, "Son, this is your home too." She smiled. But she did not ask what I needed. Maybe she assumed I did not need anything. 'Cause I never asked. That was my mistake. But habits formed over a lifetime are hard to break. I was raised to endure quietly, to give without expectation, to step back without question. Now that upbringing was costing me visibility. As the setup of our lives settled into this new pattern, I sensed that something bigger was coming. Unspoken feelings do not stay quiet forever. They gather weight. They look for a moment. And when that moment comes, they change everything. I did not know when it would happen or how. But deep inside, I knew the calm was temporary. And the real test of our relationships was yet to come. The first real conflict did not arrive with anger, it arrived quietly. Like a small crack in a wall you only notice when it starts letting cold air in. I began to feel it in everyday moments. Moments that once felt harmless now left me restless. One morning I woke up with a slight fever. Nothing serious. Just enough to make my body feel heavy. I stayed in bed longer than usual. From my room, I could hear Sana in the kitchen. Utensils clinking, the kettle boiling. Saad was getting ready for work. I waited. Not because I needed help, but because I wanted to feel noticed. No one came. After some time I got up on my own. I walked slowly to the living room. Saad was tying his shoes. Sana was handing him his lunch bag. "Mom," Saad said, "you're up early today." I smiled. "Yes." He did not notice my pale face. He did not ask if I was okay. Sana said, "Mom, you should rest more." He nodded. Those words again. Always rest. Always step back. Never come sit. Never let me help you. After Saad left, the house felt unusually quiet. I made tea for myself and sat alone. I told myself I was overthinking. I told myself not to create problems in my mind. But my heart felt heavy. That afternoon, Sana was on a phone call with her mother. She spoke openly. I did not mean to listen, but her voice carried through the hallway. She talked about how hard it was to manage everything alone. About responsibilities. About wanting things her way. She said, "I'm trying my best. But sometimes it's difficult." Her words were not cruel. But they made me feel like a burden. I wondered if she was talking about me. I stayed in my room until the call ended. That evening I tried to talk to Sana. I said gently, "Son, if you ever feel overwhelmed, you can tell me." She smiled politely. "Yes, Mom." But her eyes moved away quickly. The space between us grew slightly wider that day. Soon after, small misunderstandings started appearing. One day, I misplaced a document, an old file with important papers. I searched everywhere. Finally, I asked Sana. She said calmly, "Oh, I put it somewhere safe. You had left it out." Her tone was neutral. But something about it felt like correction. Thanked her. Later, when I asked where she kept it, she sighed softly and said, "Mom, please keep things organized." That sigh stayed with me. It was small, but it made me feel careless, like a child being corrected. I started doubting myself. I began checking things twice. I became slower. Slowness invites impatience. One evening, Sana was cooking when I entered the kitchen. I wanted to help. Picked up a spoon. She looked at me and said, "Mom, please don't change anything. I'm following a recipe." Put the spoon down. I stepped back. The kitchen felt smaller than ever. Later, Saad noticed my quiet mood. He asked, "Is everything okay?" I smiled and said yes, because explaining emotional discomfort feels harder than carrying it. But silence has a way of building pressure. And pressure looks for release. A few weeks later, Sana suggested reorganizing the storeroom. She wanted to throw away old items. Some of those items held memories. Saad agreed. They started sorting. I watched quietly as boxes were opened, old clothes were pulled out, as memories were touched without care. One box contained Saad's childhood books. Another held his school drawings. Sana said, "These are not needed anymore." I felt something rise inside my chest. I spoke for the first time with firmness. "Those are important," I said softly. Sana paused. Saad looked at me. Sana replied, "We can keep a few, Mom. But not everything." Her words were practical, logical. But logic does not understand memory. He nodded. That night I cried quietly. Not because of the books, but because I realized how easily my past could be discarded. I had protected those memories for years. And now they were being evaluated for usefulness. That realization hurt deeply. From that day, I became more guarded. I spoke less, that I watched more. Sana noticed. She asked Saad if something was wrong with me. He asked me. I told him I was fine. I did not want to create distance between them. But distance was already forming between us. Another incident happened soon after. Sana planned a family dinner. She invited her relatives. Helped where I could. On the day of the dinner, she gave instructions quickly. "Mom, please set the table like this. Mom, please don't serve that yet." Her tone was not rude, but it was commanding. I followed quietly. One of her relatives asked me a question. Before I could answer, Sana answered for me. Smiled. Inside I felt erased. After the guests left, I went to my room without saying much. Saad came later. He said, "Mom, Sana worked very hard today. Please understand." He nodded. Always understand. Always adjust. But who was understanding me? That night sleep did not come easily. My thoughts were loud. I wondered when my role changed from mother of the Husito, someone who needed permission. I never wanted power, that I never wanted control. I only wanted respect without explanation. Days passed. Tension remained under the surface. We were polite, civil, calm. But warmth was fading. One morning, Sana suggested something that shook me. She said, "Mom, maybe you would be more comfortable if you stayed more in your room. You can rest properly." Her voice was gentle, concerned. But her words felt like a boundary being drawn. I smiled and said okay. I went to my room. And I sat on the bed for a long time. That sentence replayed in my mind. Stay more in your room. That was the moment I realized this was no longer just adjustment. This was separation. Quiet, polite, but painful. The conflict was no longer inside me only. It was shaping the space between us. And I could feel something breaking slowly. And after Sana suggested I stay more in my room, something inside me changed. Not anger. Not rebellion. Just awareness. I began to notice how carefully I was being placed into smaller spaces. I started spending more time alone, not because I wanted to, but because it felt safer. In my room, I did not have to wonder if I was in the way. In my room, I did not have to read faces or measure my words. The house continued its routine without me. Meals happened on time. Plans were made. Life moved forward. I existed quietly in the background. Sometimes Sana would knock and ask, "Mom, do you need anything?" I would say no, because asking felt like begging, and I had spent my whole life giving. One afternoon I overheard Saad and Sana talking. They did not know I was nearby. Sana said, "I worry about Mom. She seems withdrawn." Saad replied, "She's always been like that. She doesn't express much." That sentence pierced me. Always been like that. As if my silence was my nature, not a response to being pushed aside. I walked back to my room quietly. That night I replayed our life in my mind. I remembered moments when I wanted to speak, but chose not to. Moments when I swallowed my needs for the sake of peace. I realized something difficult. By staying silent, I had taught them that I was fine, even when I was not. Another incident followed soon after. Sana decided to change the prayer space in the house. She wanted to move it to a smaller corner. She said it would look cleaner. I had prayed in that same spot for years. It held memories of whispered duas, of tears shed in silence, of gratitude and surrender. She informed me of the change casually. I felt my chest tighten. I said softly, "That place means a lot to me." A pause. Then she said, "Mom, Allah is everywhere. Place doesn't matter." Her words were true. But her dismissal hurt. Saad supported her. I nodded and said nothing. That night, when I prayed in the new space, my heart felt unsettled. Not because of the location but because I felt displaced. Even my prayers felt like they had to adjust. The emotional distance between us was growing. We spoke politely, we smiled, we avoided difficult topics. But avoidance does not heal. It only delays pain. One evening Saad came home late. I waited for him. Old habits do not disappear easily. When he entered I asked, "Did you eat?" He smiled tiredly. "Yes, Mom. Sana ordered food." That simple answer made me feel unnecessary. I sat back quietly. He did not notice. Another day, Sana planned a short trip for herself and Saad. She informed me the night before. "We'll be gone for 2 days," she said. He nodded. No one asked how I felt about being alone. No one asked if I needed anything. When they left, the house felt hollow. I moved from room to room, touching familiar objects. I sat in the living room where Saad used to sit with me. The silence was loud. That night I did not cook. I did not feel hungry. I slept early. When they returned they brought gifts. Small things. Sana handed me a shawl. Thanked her. But gifts cannot replace presence. The next misunderstanding was small but deeply hurtful. I accidentally used Sana's mug. She noticed and said lightly, "Oh Mom, that's mine." I apologized. She smiled and said, "It's okay. Just telling you." But I stopped using any mug except one after that. 1 mug, 1 plate, 1 space. I was shrinking myself to avoid conflict. That shrinking was costing me my peace. One day while folding clothes I felt dizzy. I sat down quickly. Sana noticed and asked if I was okay. Said yes. She suggested again that I rest more. Rest had become her solution to everything. As if rest would fix feeling invisible. As if rest would return lost connection. That evening Saad asked me directly, "Mom, are you upset with Sana?" The question startled me. "No," I replied quickly. "Why would I be?" He said, "She feels you are distant." I almost laughed. Distance was being blamed on me. I took a deep breath. I said carefully, "I don't want to come between you both." He looked relieved. That conversation ended without resolution. But something inside me broke a little. I realized that my feelings had no space. Expressing them would create discomfort. Suppressing them was expected. I chose silence again. But silence was becoming heavy. One night I stood in the kitchen alone. The lights were off. I touched the counter gently. This kitchen had once been my place of comfort. Now it felt borrowed. I whispered to myself, when did I become a guest in my own home? That question stayed with me. The rising conflict was not loud. There were no arguments, no harsh words. Just repeated moments of exclusion. Repeated reminders that I was no longer central. I loved Saad. That love did not change. But loving him now required letting go of the version of our relationship I once had. That letting go felt like grief. Grief without a funeral. Grief without acknowledgement. As days passed, I grew more tired. Emotionally drained. I started avoiding common spaces. Ate alone. Prayed alone. I lived quietly. Until one day something happened that I could not ignore. Something that forced the conflict into the open. Something that made me realize that silence had reached its limit. That moment was coming closer. And I could feel it. The turning point did not come suddenly. It came after months of quiet hurt, after many swallowed words, after too much patience. It came on an ordinary day. A day that started like any other. I woke up early, as usual, and my body felt weak, but my mind was clear. That morning I decided to cook breakfast. Not because I was asked. Not because I needed to prove anything. But because I missed feeling useful. I moved slowly in the kitchen. I tried not to disturb anything. I made simple food. Nothing special. As I was serving it, Sana walked in. She looked surprised. "Mom, you didn't tell me," she said. Her voice was not angry, just firm. I said softly, "I wanted to do it today." She paused. Then she said something that I will never forget. "Mom, you should really stop pushing yourself. You've already done your part in life." Her words were calm, her face was gentle. But inside me something shattered. Already done your part. As if my role was finished, as if my presence was no longer needed, as if I was living extra time. I stood there quietly. I did not argue. I did not defend myself. I simply nodded and stepped aside. But my hands were shaking. When Saad came in, he sensed the tension. "What happened?" he asked. Sana replied casually. "I told Mom to rest. She insists on doing things." Saad looked at me. Smiled. Because that had become my answer to everything. After breakfast, I went to my room. Closed the door. I sat on the bed and stared at the wall. For the first time in months, I did not try to calm myself. I let the feelings come. I felt sadness. I felt rejection. I felt tired. Most of all, I felt invisible. I thought about my life. I thought about how much I had given without expecting anything back. I thought about how quietly I had stepped aside so others could be comfortable. And I asked myself a painful question. If I disappear completely, will anyone notice? That question scared me. Later that afternoon, something else happened. Sana was talking on the phone again. Her voice was low but clear. She was speaking to someone close. I heard her say, "I respect her, but honestly it's hard. She doesn't fit into our routine." That sentence froze me. Doesn't fit into our routine. I stood still. My heart felt heavy. I did not listen further. I did not need to. That sentence explained everything. I was not being pushed away personally. I was being removed practically. Like furniture that no longer matches the room. That evening, Saad came to my room. He noticed I was quiet. "Mom, is something wrong?" he asked. I looked at my son. The child I raised. The man he had become. For the first time, I did not smile immediately. I stayed silent. He sat down. "Please tell me," he said. My heart was pounding. I had waited months for this moment. And now that it was here, I was afraid. I spoke slowly. "I feel like I am not needed anymore," I said. He looked surprised. "That's not true," he replied quickly. I continued. "I feel like I am always in the way, like my presence is uncomfortable." He sighed. "Mom, you are overthinking." That sentence hurt more than anything else. Overthinking. As if my feelings were imaginary. I felt tears fill my eyes, but I kept my voice steady. "I stayed quiet for a long time," I said. "I adjusted. I stepped back." He listened. But I could see confusion on his face. "I don't want to disturb your life," I said. "I just want to feel respected." He did not know what to say. That silence between us was heavy. Then Sana entered the room. She sensed something serious. "What's going on?" she asked. Saad told her. "Mom feels uncomfortable." Sana looked at me. Her face was calm. She said, "Mom, I never meant to hurt you." He nodded. "I know," I replied. "But intentions don't erase feelings." That was the first time I had spoken so directly. The room felt tense. Sana said, "I just want my own space. I need things a certain way." I replied softly, "I understand, but this is my home too." That sentence hung in the air. No one responded immediately. Saad looked between us. He looked torn. That moment was the turning point. Because for the first time, the issue was no longer silent. It was spoken. Not angrily. Not loudly. But clearly. And once truth is spoken, nothing stays the same. After I said, "This is my home too," the room fell into a quiet I had never felt before. It was not the comfortable silence we were used to. It was heavy. Unsettled. Saad shifted in his seat. Sanaa folded her hands slowly. No one spoke for a few seconds. Then Sanaa broke the silence. "Mom," she said gently, "I respect you. Truly. But I also need my life to feel normal." Normal. That word echoed in my mind, as if my presence made life abnormal. I took a deep breath. "I never asked to control anything," I said. "I never asked to interfere, I only wanted to belong." Saad looked at me then. Really looked at me. I could see something change in his eyes. Maybe he was seeing me not just as his mother, but as a woman who had grown tired of being quiet. "I didn't know you felt this way," he said. I smiled sadly. "That's because I never complained," I replied. "I thought silence would protect us." Sanaa looked down. "I didn't realize you felt pushed aside," she said. Her voice was sincere. "But sincerity cannot erase months of hurt." He nodded. "I know you didn't mean it," I said. "But meaning and impact are different." That sentence surprised even me. It was calm, clear. And it carried all the pain I had held inside. Saad stood up and walked a few steps away. He rubbed his face slowly. "I thought things were fine," he said. "You never said anything." I looked at him. "When I raised you alone," I said, "I learned to stay strong without asking for help." My voice trembled slightly. But maybe I stayed strong for too long. That moment broke something inside him. He came closer and sat beside me. "Mom," he said softly, "I never wanted you to feel this way." I placed my hand on his. "I know," I said. "That's why this hurts so much." Sanaa took a step forward. "Please tell me what I can do," she said. Thought carefully. I did not want revenge, that I did not want control. "I don't want special treatment," I said. "I just want to feel included, asked, seen." She nodded slowly. "I can try," she said. Her honesty mattered. But honesty does not instantly heal. The conversation ended quietly. No shouting, no tears. Just tired understanding. That night I lay awake. I replayed every word. I wondered if I had done the right thing. Speaking up felt relieving but also frightening. Because once you speak, you cannot go back to pretending. The next few days were different. Sanaa made an effort. She asked me small things. She included me in decisions. Saad spent more time with me. But something felt strained, forced. Care taken consciously does not feel natural. I appreciated their effort. But I could feel how carefully everyone was walking. One evening, Sanaa asked me to sit with her. Talk. She shared her fears. She said she felt pressure being a daughter-in-law. She said she wanted to do things right but didn't know how. I listened. I understood her more. But understanding does not erase wounds. I shared my own fears. I told her how it feels to lose relevance. She listened quietly. It was the first real conversation we had. Still something was clear. Living together was no longer peaceful. Not because of anger but because of emotional fatigue. A few days later, Saad spoke to me privately. He said, "Mom, I've been thinking." I waited. "I don't want you to feel uncomfortable," he continued. "And I don't want Sanaa to feel restricted. I already knew what was coming. We've been thinking, maybe it would be better if you had your own space." My heart sank. Even though I expected it, hearing it hurt. I looked at him calmly. "You mean moving out?" I asked. He nodded slowly. "For a while," he added quickly. "Nearby. We'll visit. You won't be alone." I stayed silent. The room felt small. I thought of all the years I had lived in this house. I thought of Saad's childhood memories in these walls. I thought of how quietly I had been removed already. This was just making it official. I took a deep breath. "If that brings peace," I said softly, "then maybe it's best." Saad looked relieved and sad at the same time. Sanaa later came to me. She said, "I hope you don't think I wanted this." I looked at her. "I don't blame you," I said. "But this is still happening." That night I packed a small bag. Not because I was leaving immediately, but because I needed to prepare myself. Preparation makes pain manageable. The turning point had passed. There was no going back. The life I knew had changed permanently. And now I had to learn how to live in the space that remained. The days after Saad spoke about me having my own space felt slow and unreal. Nothing changed immediately. Yet everything felt different. The house still looked the same. The walls still held the same memories. But my place inside those walls felt temporary now. I moved carefully, like someone staying somewhere on borrowed time. Sana tried to be kind. Saad tried to be attentive. But kindness mixed with guilt has a different weight. I could feel it. One morning I stood in my room and looked around. The cupboard. The bed. The small table by the window. I realized something quietly. I had been emotionally preparing for this long before anyone spoke the words. The distance had already taught me how to stand alone again. That realization did not erase the pain. But it gave me strength. I told Saad I needed some time to think things through. He respected that. I spent long hours sitting quietly, reflecting on my life. Not just recent events but everything. I thought about the young woman I once was. The wife. The widow. The mother. I realized that for most of my life, my identity had been tied to someone else. To being needed. And when that need faded, I felt lost. That was not their fault alone. I had forgotten myself too. One afternoon, I visited a small place nearby where my sister lived. She welcomed me warmly. She listened without interrupting. When I finished speaking, she said something simple. You gave your whole life to others. Now you must learn to live for yourself. Her words stayed with me. Living for myself felt unfamiliar. Almost selfish. But maybe it was necessary. When I returned home, I noticed the house differently. Less attachment. Less expectation. I started sorting my belongings. Not with bitterness. With intention. I gave away things I no longer needed, that I kept what mattered. Memories don't disappear when walls change. Saad watched quietly. One evening he came to me. Mom, he said, we found a small place nearby that it's peaceful. He nodded. He looked nervous. Are you sure about this? He asked. I looked at my son. I saw the child he once was. And the man he had become. I don't want you to carry guilt, I said. I want peace. For all of us. That night I prayed deeply. Not for change. Not for blame. But for acceptance. The day I moved was quiet. No drama, no tears. Sana helped pack my things. She was gentle. Please visit often, she said. Smiled. Home is where hearts connect, I replied. We will find our way. My new place was small. Simple. Sunlight entered freely. The first night there I sat alone. The silence felt different. Not empty. Open. I realized something important then. Being alone is not the same as being unwanted. I slowly built a routine. Morning walks. Tea by the window. Prayer without interruption. Saad visited regularly. So did Sana. Our conversations were lighter. Less pressure. Less tension. Distance, in a strange way, restored respect. I no longer felt invisible. Because I was no longer trying to fit into a space that had changed without me. I began rediscovering myself. I read more, that I visited old friends, that I laughed again. One day Sana came alone. She sat with me and said, I understand you better now. He nodded. I understand you too, I replied. We were not perfect. But we were honest. That honesty brought peace. I realized that love changes form. Does not always stay close. Sometimes it steps back so everyone can breathe. I did not fail as a mother. I raised my son strong enough to build his own life. And now I was learning to live mine. As the days passed in my new space, I began to notice changes within myself. Not sudden. Not dramatic. But steady. In the beginning I missed the old house deeply. Not the tension, not the silence. The memories. I missed hearing Saad move around, I missed the familiar sounds of daily life. But slowly I learned something important. Missing does not mean regretting. Simply means something mattered. I allowed myself to feel that without shame. I began to wake up with purpose again. Not because someone needed me, but because I needed myself. I made my bed neatly every morning. I watered the plants. I sat with my thoughts. I stopped measuring my worth by how useful I was to others. That was not easy. Old habits speak loudly. Sometimes I would catch myself wondering if Saad had eaten properly, if Sana was managing well. Then I would gently remind myself that they were capable. That reminder brought relief. Saad continued to visit often, sometimes alone, sometimes with Sana. Our conversations became more meaningful. We spoke honestly. He apologized again, not out of pressure, but understanding. "I didn't see how much you were hurting," he said once. I replied calmly, "I didn't know how to speak." That truth belonged to both of us. We learned to meet in the middle. Sana changed too. She was more thoughtful now. She listened better. One day she said something that healed a part of me. "Mom," she said, "I didn't know how heavy it is to slowly disappear in your own home." Her words were simple, but they mattered. I realized then that pain does not always come from cruelty. Sometimes it comes from ignorance. And ignorance can be corrected with honesty. I forgave her fully, not because she asked, but because holding pain was costing me peace. I also forgave myself for staying silent too long, for losing myself in duty. Forgiveness made my heart lighter. I started participating in community work, small gatherings, helping where I could, not to feel needed, but to feel connected. That difference mattered. One evening, as I sat by my window watching the sun set, I reflected on everything. I realized that life does not take away roles, transforms them. I was no longer the center of Saad's world, but I was still his mother. That truth did not disappear, simply changed shape. I learned to let love breathe, to exist without holding too tight. Saad once asked me, "Mom, are you happy?" I smiled genuinely. "Yes," I said. "I am at peace." And that was true. Peace came not from getting my place back, but from creating a new one, within myself. As the months passed, I settled into a new rhythm of life. My mornings began with the sun. The light streaming through the window felt different than the glow I had seen in my old house. It was softer, more personal. I learned to appreciate the little things. The sound of the wind rustling through trees, the distant chatter of children playing, the aroma of fresh bread from the bakery nearby. I had space to breathe, to reflect, to remember who I was outside of being Saad's mother, or the widow, or the caretaker of a house that no longer included me fully. The first time I cooked for myself in my new home, I did it slowly, intentionally. That I chopped vegetables and stirred pots without worrying about whether it was exactly right. I poured myself tea in a cup I chose. I tasted it slowly. And for the first time in a long time I felt my own presence again. Saad visited that evening. He smiled when he walked through the door. "Mom," he said softly, "the place suits you." I smiled back. "Thank you, son. I feel calm here." He sat beside me on the sofa. For a while we didn't speak, we just shared a quiet moment. Sometimes that silence is more comforting than words. Later he began speaking about his day, about work, about small frustrations. And I listened. Not as someone who needed to intervene. Not as someone expecting gratitude or attention. But as a mother who wanted to connect in peace. I noticed something beautiful. Being separate did not mean being distant. It did not mean losing love. It only meant reshaping it. Sana also visited more often. She would bring small gifts or tea. Sometimes she would sit and chat about her life. Other times she would simply be there, sharing space quietly. I began noticing the subtle kindness in her gestures. The small ways she included me without making it obvious, and I appreciated it deeply. We laughed together for the first time in months, not out of relief, not out of obligation, but naturally. Shared joke about Saad's forgetfulness, a memory of a childhood story, a light moment that reminded Met. Had even though life had shifted, connection could remain. I realized that endings are rarely final. They are transformations. They are invitations to find new ways of being, new ways of loving, new ways of living. One afternoon, I stood by my window watching the sky turn amber with sunset. I thought about all the years I had spent raising Saad alone. The sleepless nights, the quiet tears, the small victories and quiet disappointments. All of it had led to this moment, a moment of clarity and calm. I thought about my relationship with Sanaa. The tension, the misunderstandings, the subtle hurt. And I realized something. She had not taken my place, she had not erased my history, she had only made room for the next chapter. And I had the choice to write my own chapter too. I picked up my journal that evening. For the first time in years, I wrote not about someone else, but about myself, my thoughts, my feelings, my dreams that were never tied to raising a child or keeping a house in perfect order. I wrote about laughter I wanted to have, travels I wanted to make, friends I wanted to see, small things, big things. All of them mine. Writing felt like a reclamation, a gentle reminder that life continues, even after being pushed to the background. Even after feeling invisible. And that one's own presence matters, regardless of others' perception. A week later, Saad called. He sounded hesitant at first. "Mom, I wanted to tell you something. I feel I wasn't aware of your feelings before. I'm sorry." I smiled. "I know, son. And that's okay. We learn as we go." His voice grew warmer. "I want us to spend time together, just us sometimes. Would you like that?" I nodded. "Yes, that would be wonderful." That night I reflected again that I understood something crucial. Life is not about preventing loss, it is about embracing change, it is about finding peace in a world that keeps moving, it is about honoring the love that existed and allowing space for new connections without letting go of your own worth. I began creating new rituals. Morning walks in the park. Afternoon tea with friends. Evening prayers with Saad and occasional conversations with Sanaa. Each action was intentional. Each moment a reminder that life continues and I still mattered. The house I had left behind was no longer my center, but it had given me everything I needed. Strength, resilience, and unconditional love. And now I realized my new space was not a punishment, it was freedom, a freedom I had earned after years of giving myself to others. Sometimes I thought of the invisible feelings I had carried, how heavy they had been. But I no longer let them weigh me down, instead I acknowledged them, gently, and then released them. The days turned into weeks, and I felt a gentle rhythm in my life again. I no longer measured my days by how much I could give to others. Instead, I measured them by how present I could be in my own life. One morning I opened the curtains fully. Sunlight poured into my room, warming every corner. I made tea and sat by the window. For the first time in a long while, I felt the quiet joy of simply existing, no obligations, no expectations. Just me. Saad visited that afternoon. He came in with a warm smile, holding a small bouquet of flowers. "I saw these and thought of you," he said softly. I took them and inhaled their fragrance, not because of the flowers themselves, but because of the thoughtfulness, thought that respected my presence, without trying to control it. We sat together quietly. He told me about work, about life, and about small joys. I shared mine. We laughed, softly, naturally. I realized that love doesn't have to be loud to exist. It can be calm, steady, and comforting. Later, Sanaa came to visit. She had a simple smile on her face. We shared tea, and I noticed something new. She no longer felt like a replacement. She was an addition. Our relationship had changed, not because of distance, but because of understanding. I reflected on the years I had spent raising Saad alone. I thought about every sacrifice, every sleepless night, every quiet tear. And I realized that all of it had led me here, to a place of quiet strength, that a place where I could exist without seeking validation, a place where I could love freely, without losing myself in the process. That evening I sat by my window again. The sky was painted in soft shades of pink and orange. I whispered a prayer of gratitude. For Saad, for Sanaa, for the life I had lived, and for the life I was learning to live now. I understood something important. Life is not about staying at the center of someone else's world. It's about finding your own center. It's about honoring yourself while loving others. It's about presence, intention, and calm acceptance. I thought about the months of feeling invisible. I did not regret them because they taught me resilience. They taught me patience, empathy, and the quiet power of standing alone. And as I sat in that soft evening light, I realized one more truth. Love is not possession. It is freedom. It is space. It is understanding. Saad and Sanaa would continue their lives together, and I would continue mine. Separate, yes. But connected by love that had matured from dependence to respect, from proximity to understanding. I smiled softly, feeling a warmth in my heart that I had not felt in years. I was no longer invisible, I was present, I was seen, not through obligation, not through duty, but through acknowledgement and mutual respect. And in that quiet moment I made a promise to myself. I would never let my worth be defined by my role in someone else's life. I would nurture it quietly, lovingly, and intentionally. I would embrace my solitude, find peace in my own company, and let love flow freely without fear of being erased. Life, I realized, is a gentle teacher. It guides us through loss, through change, through pain. And at the end, it rewards us with a subtle wisdom. To live fully, to love calmly, and to find joy in the quiet space we create for ourselves. I raised a son alone that I gave him strength, guidance, and love. Now I gave myself the same gift. And in doing so, I discovered that the heart can expand endlessly, for those we love and for ourselves. The sunset faded into night, stars appeared one by one. I sat in calm reflection, knowing that tomorrow would bring a new day, that a day where I would walk into it not as someone invisible, but as someone fully present, fully alive, and fully at peace. Because life is not about being seen by everyone. It is about seeing yourself clearly, loving yourself completely, and holding space for both joy and quiet strength. And in that understanding I found my true home.